New Jersey, October 1944. 15 German women stepped off the transport ship at Newark Harbor, blinking in autumn sunlight after 3 weeks in the cargo hold, and saw American soldiers waiting on the dock. The women froze. These men were enormous, not just tall, but broad-shouldered, well-fed, moving with casual strength that came from abundance rather than deprivation. Propaganda had promised them Americans were soft, weakened by luxury, physically inferior. But Corporal Anna Braun, 26, from a Berlin suburb where everyone was thin from years of rationing, whispered what they all thought: they look like giants. To understand the shock of that October morning in Newark, you must first understand what 15 German women had experienced in the final year of war. Anna Braun had lost 12 kilograms between January and August 1944. She'd been 62 kilos when the year started, healthy weight for her 165-centimeter frame. By August, when she was captured in France, she weighed 50 kilos. Ribs showed, cheekbones protruded. Her uniform hung loose on a body that had forgotten what adequate food meant. She wasn't alone. Germany was starving. The blockades worked. Allied bombing disrupted supply lines. Resources went to frontline troops, leaving civilians and support personnel on minimum rations that weren't minimum enough to sustain health. Anna had been a communications specialist radio operator for Luftwaffe units in France. Not combat, not glamorous, just technical work that required education and precision. When Allied forces pushed through Normandy in summer 1944, her unit retreated, then scattered, then surrendered piecemeal as organization collapsed. She was captured near Lyon on August 23, along with 14 other women from various auxiliary units. They were processed through facilities in France, then England, then loaded onto a transport ship for America. 3 weeks in a converted cargo hold, seasick and frightened, eating minimal rations while the ship crossed an ocean that seemed impossibly wide. During the voyage, they talked about what awaited them, about propaganda's promises, about American degeneracy and weakness, about how a nation corrupted by luxury and diversity couldn't produce strong soldiers or resilient people. "They will be soft," said Greta Hoffman, 32, a cipher specialist from Hamburg. "We were taught this. America chooses comfort over discipline. They cannot match our strength. Then why are we prisoners and they are victors?" Asked Liesel Koch, 24, practical and increasingly skeptical of everything she'd been taught. The question hung unanswered. If Americans were soft and weak, how had they won? If German discipline and sacrifice were superior, why were 15 German women crossing an ocean as defeated captives? The contradiction was too large to process, easier to wait and see, to trust propaganda despite evidence, to maintain beliefs that made defeat comprehensible. October 12, 1944. Morning gray and cool. The transport ship docked at Newark, New Jersey. The women were brought up from below deck, blinking in daylight they hadn't seen in 3 weeks, breathing air that didn't smell of diesel and sickness. The dock was busy, cargo being unloaded, personnel moving with purpose, the organized chaos of a wartime port, and standing in formation, waiting to receive prisoners, were American soldiers. Anna looked at them and felt reality tilt. They were huge, not just one or two, all of them. 6 feet tall, many taller, broad-shouldered. Their uniforms fit properly because their bodies filled them. They stood with posture that came from strength rather than discipline. They looked healthy, well-fed, solid. "Mean got," Greta whispered. "They're enormous." It wasn't just height. Anna had seen tall men, but these soldiers had weight to them, muscle, substance. They looked like they'd never missed a meal in their lives. They looked like propaganda's opposite. A sergeant stepped forward, 6'2", maybe 90 kilos, with shoulders that strained his uniform jacket. His voice carried across the dock without shouting, just natural projection from a chest that could hold that much air. From a single line: "Have your documentation ready. You will be processed efficiently and fairly. No talking. Follow instructions." His German was adequate, accented but comprehensible. The women lined up in silence, too shocked to do anything else. Anna stood 5th in line. When her turn came, the sergeant looked down at her. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He checked her papers, marked something on his clipboard, gestured toward a waiting truck. She walked where he indicated, feeling small in a way she'd never felt before. Not just physically small, but diminished. These men represented abundance she couldn't comprehend. They were walking proof that everything propaganda had taught was wrong. The processing facility was a converted warehouse, cavernous space, concrete floors, harsh electric lights, tables arranged in rows where military personnel checked documentation, assigned numbers, recorded information. The women moved through stations. First, medical examination. They stripped behind screens, were weighed, measured, checked for diseases and injuries. Anna stood on a scale while an American nurse, also large, healthy-looking, competent, recorded her weight. 50 kilograms, the nurse said in broken German. You are underweight. We will provide supplemental rations. Anna looked at the nurse, a woman maybe 70 kilos, not fat but solid, healthy. In Germany, only the very wealthy or very corrupt looked like that anymore. Here, apparently, even military nurses had access to enough food to maintain proper weight. Next, delousing. They were sprayed with DDT powder, given clean clothing, prisoner uniforms marked PW on the back but new, properly sized. Anna's new uniform actually fit. It had been years since she'd worn clothing that wasn't too large for her shrinking frame. Next, interrogation. Brief interviews with intelligence officers who asked about military service, knowledge of operations, contacts with regime officials. The questions were professional, the tone neutral, no threats, no intimidation, just information gathering. Anna's interrogator was Captain James Morrison, 6'1", maybe 85 kilos, with a face that looked young despite gray at his temples. He spoke fluent German with a slight Austrian accent. You were communications specialist? He asked, reviewing her file. Yes, radio operator, weather reports, routine transmissions, no classified information. No sensitive operations? No, I was support personnel, low-level auxiliary. Morrison made notes. You'll be assigned to Camp Rustin in Louisiana, agricultural area, warm climate. You'll work in camp administration or local farms, pay according to Geneva Convention rates. Any questions? Why are you so? Anna stopped, unsure how to phrase it. So what? Morrison prompted. So big, so healthy. We were told Americans were soft, weakened by luxury, but you all look strong. Morrison's expression shifted slightly. We have adequate food. That's the difference. Germany has been on wartime rationing for years. America hasn't. We produce more food than we can consume. Our soldiers eat well. That's why we look healthy. But propaganda said propaganda lied. Morrison interrupted gently. About many things. You'll learn that. It takes time to unlearn lies, but you will. That evening, the women ate their first meal in American custody. The mess hall was vast tables stretching into distance, capable of feeding hundreds simultaneously. American soldiers ate at some tables, prisoners, mostly German men, a few Italians at others. The women were directed to a separate section. Each prisoner received a metal tray divided into sections. Servers, American enlisted men, loaded the trays with food. Anna stared at her tray, unable to process what she was seeing. Meat, actual meat, substantial portions, mashed potatoes, green beans, bread with butter, an apple, milk, coffee. This was more food than she'd seen in a single meal in 2 years. This was abundance on a scale that seemed criminal given Germany's starvation. They eat like this every day. Liesel whispered. The soldiers do, Greta replied, watching American personnel at nearby tables consume identical meals, and apparently prisoners too. Anna ate slowly, trying to moderate her intake, knowing her stomach had shrunk from malnutrition. The meat was tender, properly cooked. The potatoes were creamy. The bread was fresh. Each bite confirmed what her eyes had told her on the dock. America had resources Germany couldn't imagine. How did we ever think we could win? Liesel asked quietly. The question was dangerous, questioning the war effort, questioning leadership, questioning the entire ideological foundation they'd been taught, all dangerous. But here, in an American mess hall, eating American food while guarded by American soldiers who looked like they'd never known hunger, the question felt necessary. Anna had no answer. She just ate and felt her body respond to nutrition it had lacked for so long, and tried to reconcile propaganda with reality. The next morning, they boarded a train heading south. The journey would take 3 days through Pennsylvania, Virginia, Tennessee, Mississippi, finally to Louisiana, 3 days to see America. From a prisoner car. The women pressed against windows, watching countryside roll past. The abundance was overwhelming. Farms with full barns, towns with intact buildings, cities showing no bomb damage, lights burning at night without fear of air raids, children playing in yards, people who looked well-fed, unhurried, untouched by war. It's not real, Greta insisted. They're showing us only the good parts, hiding the destruction. But the train rolled for days and the good parts never ended. Through mountains and plains and river valleys, past towns and farms and cities, all looking prosperous, all undamaged, all functioning as if war was something happening very far away. At stops, American soldiers moved about with casual confidence. Big men, healthy men, men who moved like they'd never doubted they'd win, because why would they doubt when they came from this abundance? On the second day, while the train stopped in Chattanooga, Anna watched American civilians on the platform, children laughing, women with grocery bags full of food. Men in work clothes heading to factories. No one looked hungry, no one looked frightened. The war was barely a disruption to them. They never suffered, Anna said quietly. Their cities weren't bombed, their families weren't starving. They fought a war while staying safe and prosperous. How do you defeat people like that? You don't, Liesel replied. That's the answer. You don't defeat people who can fight you with only a fraction of their resources while keeping the rest safe at home. We were fools to try. They arrived on October 16th. Camp Rustin, Louisiana, a vast installation that had been expanded to hold prisoners of war. Thousands of German men already there, plus smaller numbers of Italians. The women were a minority, maybe 200 total, housed in a separate compound for security and propriety. The camp's processing officer was Lieutenant Sarah Chen, an American woman of Chinese descent, fluent in German, efficient and unsympathetic. She addressed the new arrivals without warmth but without cruelty. You are prisoners of war under Geneva Convention protection. You will receive adequate food, shelter, and medical care. You will work 6 days per week. Sundays you rest. Pay will be credited to your accounts. Male privileges will be granted after security clearance. Violations of rules will be punished. Cooperation will be rewarded. Any questions? The women stood in silence. Lieutenant Chen was smaller than the male soldiers, maybe 5'6", but she carried herself with authority that transcended physical size. She was well-fed, healthy, confident. Another example of America's incomprehensible abundance. They were assigned to Barracks 7. The building was wooden, simple. Heated by a pot-bellied stove, 20 beds with thin mattresses. Adequate blankets, screens on windows, shared bathroom with running water. Nothing luxurious but clean and functional. These are better conditions than most German soldiers experienced at the front, Greta observed. How is this punishment? How is this suffering for defeat? Anna had no answer. She was beginning to understand that American approach to prisoners was fundamentally different from what propaganda had taught, different from what she'd expected, different from what made sense given the ideology she'd absorbed. Morning came early, 6 o'clock wake-up call, breakfast at 6:30, oatmeal, eggs, toast, coffee. More food than Anna had eaten for breakfast in years, then work assignments. The women were distributed to various tasks, some to camp administration, filing, record-keeping, translation, some to the kitchen, some to laundry services, some to local farms that needed agricultural labor. Anna was assigned to the base hospital laundry. The supervisor was Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien, 6'3", maybe 95 kilos, from Boston, with red hair and freckles and a voice that could carry across the vast laundry room without shouting. He stood with Anna and 3 other German women, explaining their tasks in careful, simplified English. You wash, you dry, you fold, you stack, everything organized by type, hospital linens, uniforms, personal items, quality matters. Soldiers heal better in clean beds. His sheer size was distracting. Standing near him, Anna felt like a child. He could probably lift all 4 women simultaneously. His forearms were thicker than her calves. He moved with the casual strength of someone who'd never doubted his physical capability. You understand? He asked. Yes, Anna replied in broken English. We understand. Good. Work starts now. The laundry room was industrial, huge washing machines, drying equipment, pressing stations, folding tables. The work was hard, hot, repetitive, but the routine was bearable. Hours passed in steam and detergent smell and the mechanical rhythm of washing, drying, folding. At lunch, O'Brien brought sandwiches for the workers, thick bread, substantial meat, vegetables. He ate 3 sandwiches in the time it took Anna to finish one. His appetite matched his size. He consumed food like it was infinite because apparently, in America, it was. "You eat so much," Anna said in her halting English. "How is this possible?" O'Brien looked at her, really looked, noticing her thinness for the first time. "You need more food," he said. "You're too skinny. I'll talk to the mess sergeant. Get you extra rations. Why would you do this?" Anna asked. "I am prisoner. Enemy. You're a worker," O'Brien replied. "Can't work properly if you're starving. Makes sense to feed you right." The practicality was distinctly American. Feed prisoners adequately, not from mercy but from efficiency. Well-fed workers are productive workers. The logic was sound, but it contrasted sharply with the ideology Anna had been taught that strength came from discipline and sacrifice, not from full stomachs. Weeks became months. October turned to November, then December. Anna's body changed. With 3 meals daily plus supplemental rations O'Brien had arranged, she gained weight. Her ribs stopped showing. Her face filled out. Her uniform started fitting properly instead of hanging loose. By Christmas, she'd gained back 8 of the 12 kilograms she'd lost. She felt stronger, steadier, more like the person she'd been before war and starvation had winnowed her down. But the physical transformation was accompanied by psychological transformation that was harder to measure. She watched American soldiers daily, big men, healthy men, men who represented abundance Germany couldn't match. And slowly, inevitably, she accepted what her body had been telling her since that first day on the Newark dock. Propaganda had lied about everything that mattered. Americans weren't soft. They were strong because they were well-fed. They weren't weak. They were powerful because their nation could field armies while keeping civilians safe. They weren't inferior. They were successful because their system produced abundance while Germany's system produced sacrifice. The realization was devastating. It meant everything she'd believed was wrong. Everything she'd served was based on lies. The ideology that had governed her life was propaganda designed to make privation feel like virtue and weakness feel like strength. On Christmas Day, the camp served special meals: turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, pie. More food than Anna had seen on any holiday in Germany for years. American soldiers and German prisoners ate similar meals in the same mess hall, separated by section but sharing abundance. Anna sat with her tray, looking at food that would have fed her family for days in Berlin, and felt something crack inside her. Not her body that was healing, but her certainty. Her ideological framework, the lies that had sustained her through years of war. She wrote to her family that evening a letter that would be censored, delayed, but eventually reach her parents. "Dear Mother and Father, I am well and being treated fairly. I have gained weight. I have adequate food and shelter. I have learned something important here. We were lied to, about Americans, about what their society is capable of, about the strength that comes from abundance rather than sacrifice. When I come home, we must talk about this. We must question what we were taught. I am no longer certain of anything I once believed. Your daughter, Anna." March 1945 brought news of Germany's collapse. Cities falling, forces retreating, leadership in chaos. The war was ending badly, as everyone had known it would eventually, but the speed was shocking. In the camp, prisoners listened to radio broadcasts with mixed emotions: relief that fighting would end, dread about what defeat meant for families, for homeland, for the future. Shame that they'd served a cause that had failed so comprehensively. Anna continued her work in the laundry. Sergeant O'Brien continued supervising with gruff efficiency. Their relationship had evolved into something like mutual respect, not friendship. The war made that impossible, but recognition of each other's humanity. One April afternoon, while folding sheets in the steam-filled room, Anna asked him a question that had been building for months. "Why are you so big? All Americans? Is everyone in your country like this?" O'Brien considered the question seriously. "Not everyone. Some people are small, some are large. But yeah, most Americans eat well, have 4 generations. Good food makes for strong bodies. That's just biology. In Germany, we believed strength came from discipline, from sacrifice, from will. Will matters," O'Brien agreed. "But will on an empty stomach only goes so far. You need both discipline and adequate nutrition. Your government taught you to value one and ignore the other. That was ally designed to make starvation feel like virtue." How do you know these things? Anna asked. About propaganda. About lies? O'Brien smiled sadly. Because America has its own propaganda. Every country does. Difference is, in America we're allowed to question it, to point out when the government lies, to demand truth from leaders. That's what democracy means, the right to call out falsehoods. We had no such right, Anna said quietly. I know, that's why you lost. May brought unexpected visitors, German prisoners being repatriated from other camps, stopping at Rustin temporarily during transit. Among them were male prisoners Anna recognized from her unit in France, men who'd been captured before her, who'd spent longer in American custody. One was her former supervisor, Lieutenant Werner Cross, 43, career military officer who'd managed communications operations. He looked transformed, 20 kilos heavier, healthy, moving without the exhaustion that had marked him in France. Anna, he said when he saw her, you look well, so do you, sir, better than I've ever seen you. They talked during evening hours, comparing experiences. Cross had been held at a camp in Texas, working on a ranch, learning about American agriculture. His English was fluent now. His perspective had shifted in ways that would have been unthinkable 2 years earlier. Did you notice the size difference? Anna asked, between us and them. Immediately, Cross replied. First day, seeing American soldiers on the dock, I felt like a child. They were enormous, not just tall, substantial. It took me weeks to understand why. Food, Anna said. Food, Cross agreed. But more than that. Abundance. A society wealthy enough to feed everyone adequately. An economy capable of fighting global war without starving its people. We were taught such societies were weak, decadent. We were taught sacrifice made us strong. But strong men don't look like skeletons. Healthy populations don't go hungry. We were lied to about what strength means. What will you do? Anna asked, when you return to Germany? Tell the truth, Cross said firmly. Teach anyone who'll listen that the ideology we served was built on lies. That America won not because they were better humans, but because they had better systems that produced food and weapons and healthy soldiers simultaneously. That's what we need to learn from this defeat. May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was over. American soldiers celebrated not cruelly, but with obvious relief. In the women's compound, prisoners gathered in small groups, speaking quietly, processing what defeat meant. Anna stood near the fence, watching American personnel celebrate. They looked the same as always, big, healthy, confident, but now they were also victorious. The war that had consumed her homeland had been for them an overseas adventure that ended successfully while their families remained safe. How did we ever think we could win? Greta asked, joining her at the fence. Looking at them, knowing what we know now about their abundance, about our lies, how did we believe victory was possible? Because we were taught to believe, Anna replied. Because questioning was dangerous. Because propaganda is effective if you control all information. Because lies repeated constantly become truth if you never hear alternatives. I feel like a fool, Greta said. I believed everything, taught my children the regime's lies, served a cause built on falsehoods. How do I live with that? By learning, Anna suggested. By admitting we were wrong, by teaching truth when we return home, by helping rebuild Germany into something better than what we served. You sound like Lieutenant Cross, Greta observed. He's right, Anna said. The only way forward is through honesty, through facing what we believed and why it was wrong. Through accepting that those soldiers she gestured at celebrating Americans were our enemies, but they weren't evil. They were just people from a society that made different choices. Better choices, it turns out. Repatriation began in summer 1945. The women of Camp Rustin would be transported to New York, then shipped to Germany for release into occupation zones. Processing would take months, but everyone knew they'd be going home eventually. Anna's orders came in September. She would leave in 2 weeks, return to a Germany she'd left 2 years earlier as a confident servant of an empire, return as a defeated prisoner who'd learned that confidence had been built on lies. On her last day of work, Sergeant O'Brien called her into the laundry room office. He handed her an envelope. Your final wages, plus a bonus I arranged. You were a good worker. Anna took the envelope, felt the weight of American currency inside. Thank you, for everything, for treating me fairly, for feeding me when I was starving, for showing me that enemies can be decent to each other. You earned it, O'Brien replied. Then, awkwardly, Can I ask you something? Of course, when you arrived that first day you looked so scared, like you expected us to be monsters. Where did that come from? Propaganda, Anna said simply. We were taught you were cruel, that capture meant torture, that Americans were savages who showed no mercy. Every source confirmed it. Why would we doubt? And now? O'Brien asked. What do you believe now? Anna thought carefully. Now I believe that propaganda is designed to prevent exactly what happened to me, seeing enemies as humans, recognizing that different societies can produce different outcomes, understanding that size and health aren't weakness, they're strength. Your government fed you well, mine starved its people. That difference mattered more than any ideology. Good, O'Brien said. Take that understanding home, teach it to others, help Germany learn from this defeat. I will try, Anna promised. The voyage to Germany took 2 weeks. Anna stood on deck as the ship approached Bremerhaven, seeing homeland for the first time in 2 years. The coastline looked scarred. Cities showed bomb damage even from distance. Everything looked smaller, more fragile, more damaged than memory suggested. She thought about American soldiers she'd seen, huge men, healthy men, representatives of abundance she now understood Germany had never possessed. She thought about the psychological impact of that size difference, how it had symbolized everything propaganda had gotten wrong. They'd been taught Americans were weak, but weakness doesn't produce 6-foot-tall soldiers who move with casual strength. Weakness doesn't create societies that can fight global wars without starving civilians. Weakness doesn't look like the men who'd guarded Camp Rustin. Germany had confused privation with virtue, discipline with strength, sacrifice with superiority. And that confusion had led to defeat against enemies who understood that actual strength comes from adequate resources, not from propaganda claiming hardship makes you powerful. When she disembarked at Bremerhaven, she was processed through repatriation facilities, given basic supplies, released into an occupied Germany that felt more foreign than America had. She found her family living in damaged housing outside Berlin. They looked thin, tired, worn by years of war and its aftermath. They looked, she realized, like she had looked when she'd arrived at Newark Harbor, malnourished, exhausted, physically diminished by years of insufficient food. Tell us about America, her father said that. First evening, tell us about captivity. Anna told them about Newark Dock and American soldiers who looked like giants, about Camp Rustin and adequate food, about Sergeant O'Brien and 3 meals daily and the slow restoration of her health, about learning that propaganda had lied about everything that mattered. They were bigger than us, she said, not because of genetics, or racial superiority or any of the nonsense we were taught. Because they ate better, because their society produced abundance while ours produced propaganda. That was the difference. That's why we lost. Her father was quiet for a long time. Finally, we were fools. We believed leaders who sacrificed us for their ambitions. We need to rebuild Germany on truth, not lies. Yes, Anna agreed. We do. Anna Braun spent her post-war years working as a translator for occupation forces, then as a teacher in reconstructed German schools. She taught English and American history, always emphasizing the lessons she'd learned at Camp Rustin. In her classes, she kept a photograph donated by a former American soldier showing Camp Rustin guards. Big men, healthy men. Physical manifestations of the abundance that had won the war. Look at these soldiers, she'd tell students. They look like giants compared to German prisoners. Not because Americans are superior race, because America had resources we lacked. Food, industrial capacity, economic strength. They won because their system worked better than ours. Remember this when anyone promises you that sacrifice and privation will make you strong. Strength comes from adequate resources, not from propaganda claiming hardship is virtue. Some students resisted, some parents complained, but Anna persisted, supported by other teachers who'd also learned hard lessons about propaganda and truth. She corresponded with Sergeant O'Brien 4 years. He'd returned to Boston after the war, worked in construction, raised a family. His letters described post-war America prosperous, expanding, increasingly dominant. Her letters described post-war Germany rebuilding, questioning, transforming. In 1965, she visited America for the first time as a free citizen. Flew to Boston, met O'Brien, now 52, still large but graying. They toured the city together, ate in restaurants, talked about the war and what came after. Do you still think about that first day?" O'Brien asked, seeing American soldiers at Newark. "Every time I teach," Anna replied, "I tell students about propaganda that claimed you were weak." Then I described standing on that dock, seeing soldiers who looked like giants, realizing everything I'd been taught was lies. It's the best lesson I can give them, that propaganda always lies about enemies, and truth is only found through direct experience. "I'm glad we treated you well," O'Brien said. "Glad we helped you see through the lies." "You did more than that," Anna replied. "You helped me understand that size matters not as propaganda about racial hierarchies, but as simple truth about nutrition and resources. Well-fed soldiers are bigger than starving ones. Prosperous societies produce bigger people than societies in crisis. That's not ideology, that's just biology. And economics." Understanding that helped me unlearn everything false I'd been taught. And Abron died in 2002 at age 84. Among her possessions, her family found that photograph of Camp Rustin guards, big men in American uniforms, standing confident and healthy, representing the abundance that had won the war. On the back, she'd written in both German and English, "They looked like giants. I thought this was propaganda's opposite. I was taught Americans were weak. These men looked strong. I thought this was evidence of lies. It was, but not the lies I expected. They looked like giants because they were well-fed, because their society produced abundance, because adequate resources create strong bodies. We were taught sacrifice makes us strong. But hunger makes us small. Privation makes us weak. Propaganda makes us fools. This photograph reminds me that truth is found in bodies that doen't lie. Well-fed people are bigger than starving ones. That simple fact demolished an ideology. Remember it." And Abron, 1965.